In China, the leader Xi Jinping has secured a historic third-term mandate as president from the country's parliament. This move follows a consolidation of power that has made 69-year-old President Xi China's most dominant leader in generations.
President Xi's power comes from being General Secretary of the Communist Party and Chairman of the Central Military Commission. That's because in the Chinese system of governance, the functions of the president are largely ceremonial. President Xi was handed both posts at a party congress last October. The confirmation of his third term as president is now the icing on his dream cake, and it had been widely expected. However, the naming of a new prime minister and various ministers in the coming days is considered very important. The new appointees are mostly expected to be President Xi Jinping's loyalists. This includes Li Qiang, who is expected to serve as the president's second-in-command. China is recovering from the bang of COVID-19 and a tough policy that fueled anti-government protests. The country is also facing a falling birth rate that threatens its economic growth engine. Ties between Beijing and Washington remain shaky. Recently, there were allegations of China spying on the U.S. with balloons. Now that President Xi has secured his third-term dream, the world waits to see if this will translate into better ties with allies and improved diplomacy with perceived enemy nations.
And for more on President Xi's historic third term in office as China's leader, an international law expert, Livingston Weche, joins me via Zoom from Abuja. Good to have you join us.
And good to have you too.
So President Xi is now the most dominant leader and most influential politician, or just even most powerful politician in China. But in the past in the past decade, he has faced protest over the zero COVID-19 policy. He has also had dissent in Hong Kong. Do you think that he's more popular today than he was in 2012 when he became the leader of China, and in 2013 when he became the president?
Well, you see, China is among the few contemporary party-led dictatorships. Among them are the likes of Vietnam, Cuba, and North Korea. And it's important to note that this development is a further enhancement of that monopoly of power by the Chinese, what do you call it now? That is the Chinese Communist Party. The only person who has held on to power in this manner that Xi Jinping has done was Chairman Mao Zedong. That is the founder and the progenitor of the People's Republic of China in 1949. Xi Jinping's extension by 5 more years is seen as a lifetime presidential ambition. As it were, in 2018, there was a sweeping constitutional amendment in China. Ordinarily, by that amendment, prior to that amendment, Xi should have stepped down this year, that is 2023. But he has had an extension, which is now placed in the likeness of a lifetime presidency. And this is a country that has suppressed fundamental rights as applicable to other developed nations of the world, even though there are arguments as to whether China is a democracy or not. But observers note strongly that China is not in the definition of the Western-style democracy, a democracy of sorts. It is a dictatorship and an authoritarian system, which some have referred to as a neo-authoritarian system that suppresses opinions and dissents within its climb. Ordinarily, within the provisions of the Chinese constitution, there are provisions for free speech and so on, but they hide under the clandestine clause of the protection of state secrets to jail those who tend to criticize the government. This is not fairly
Absolutely.
a good.
We've seen him. We've seen him take tough stands against dissenting voices. Some of them are now facing different jail terms in Hong Kong, especially. We've also seen him take tough stands against over Taiwan and a recent confrontation with the U.S. We've seen a confrontational Xi Jinping, and we've seen a Xi Jinping that is very influential, especially in places like Africa. What sort of disposition do you think he would take globally in the next 5 years?
He has been strongly emboldened by this ascension to the throne for the very third time. You know that the presidency, like your report did say, of China is ceremonial, but as the General Secretary of the China Communist Party, as well as the chairman of the Military Commission, he has assumed the position of an absolutist. And that will raise a lot of contention within the global community, particularly China being a leading economic and technology power. It has about the highest military might in the world, and also considering its relationship with the states like Russia, America will be put on its toes because the regime that America seeks to, and the NATO allies seek to ensure that it comes to an end, has now been extended almost for a lifetime. Because what that implies is that the international diplomatic community will have to readjust itself on how to manage some of the stronger stance that Xi Jinping will be coming up with. Because you see, this development is not on account of any other, but to further promote and pursue those communism and the new age ideologies of these authoritarian powers that are emerging now and have continued to strengthen themselves from the likes of China. The next to take up from that, it's North Korea, because these are not states where elections are conducted at the national level. Xi Jinping stands to remain there almost forever. And Russia is a strong ally. There are two divided walls now between the China-led communist and authoritarian realms and then the Western-led styled democracies championed by America and Britain. So there is going to be a clash of civilization. There is going to be a redefining of what we call democracy and governance. And the people at the receiving end will be the not too strong countries that you refer to as developing countries, because it will be a contest of opinion, a contest of ideologies, and whoever wins steals the show in global leadership. Because what is of great essence here, what is in contest here, is the control of the global powerhouse between the American-led Western-style democracy.
Absolutely, and you know we already sorry to interrupt. We already see that playing out. We see countries struggling to form alliance, deciding who to form the alliance with. Should we go with China, Russia, and Iran, or should it be America and Europe? And that's been a struggle for a lot of countries. And those who seem to choose on both sides have also had, the hammer, on them from the other side. But let me ask you about Taiwan, which is a big question for a lot of analysts as to what would happen to Taiwan in the next 5 years. Do you see, or are there any prospects of military confrontation in Taiwan?
Yeah, that tension will continue to rise, depending on the alliances between Taiwan and those it is developing strength with. I know that the last visit of the American delegation caused a lot of tension that resulted in a firepower within the borders of China and its neighbors. Now, that tension will be sustained. China is bent on incursion. China is bent on intruding into those territories because China believes that those territories are Chinese territories. It will send a chill pill, but again, it is up to those nations to still stick to their gun and maintain and assert their sovereignty with the much alliances they can get from the West, because the only alternative or the only available respite for them is to build stronger alliances, but that will also mean that they will need to get into some measure of concessions, because nothing goes for nothing within the international political arena. There must be some concessions. What are you giving up? America is not in it because America is passionate or compassionate. America has its own scientific, military, and economic interests, which these other nations that needs its support, we need to ensure that it surrenders. So, but it will be left for these countries who will be impacted by these developments to negotiate and to measure, as well as put up on a scale between the American offers and what China is coming up with. Where does our fate lie? It's an unfortunate situation, but like they say, is the survival of the survival of the fittest. So there is going to be interesting moments in the coming years, depending on where the pendulum will swing.
But let's talk about that interesting moment. How deep do you think that dividing line will be in terms of countries having to decide which of these divides serves them better? We've seen that South Africa seems to be leaning towards Russia and China in terms of military. We've seen that naval, I think it was a naval joint exercise between those three countries. But how deep do you think that line would be? And will there also be areas of cooperation?
Well, this is more of the question of sovereignty conundrum. It's going to be a question of respecting the territorial integrity of nations. But we've come to the point in international relations and politics and diplomacy where territorial integrity is no longer of the essence by the more powerful states, because they compromise and undermine your sovereignty in order to assert their interest over you and bring you to a point of submission. So what will be happening in the coming years is going to be more of incursions, like you're saying, between Russia and Ukraine. If a global community is not able to come to a common front and stand to resist this manner of invasion that is already taking over the world, like I did say earlier on, it's a contest between two civilizations, between the communist authoritarian regimes and the Western-style democracies contending with themselves. But the nations who are aligning either to the left or to the right will begin to weigh the options as to what benefits them the most. In Africa, there are contests between the America-led NATO and Russia, China on one side over the control of the African politics and the African economy. You have seen the lone regimes within certain states where China comes up with certain conditionalities subject to failure of same, resulting in the taking over of national assets. You've seen also America, where they have allegedly sponsored a measure of arms dealings in certain areas to cause political instability in certain parts of Africa, all aimed at ensuring that these territories are brought under submission to be at the mercy of them. Now, but the question will be, which of these options, while we build up inner strength and regional cohesion towards our survival, which of these powers will be in our respective interest? It is the answer to these questions that will determine what stance these other weaker nations will take, and also will determine what measures the stronger ones will take against them. Because I want to maintain that we are faced with a clash, a very vehement and fierce clash of civilization that will be confronting the global community in the coming years. It will grow wider and wider until we come to a point of total control by either one or the collapse of both.
I mean, interesting times ahead. I will continue to follow developments. Thank you so much for talking to us. Always a pleasure speaking with you. International law expert, Livingstone Weche.